Hello everyone, my name is Norie Ape. I'm not Cook Island, just in case you're wondering. I do get confused for a lot. So today I'm going to be talking to you about something that is much bigger than AI, which is how we build teams, and in particular, how we make decisions, and ultimately how Aotearoa shapes its tech future. When we think about AI, there are like massive opportunities, but kind of before I go through, I just do want to acknowledge that there's been a lot of work to get this event on. So I want to say thank you to the organisers, the team. That's a lot of work. What I also want to kind of put as a caveat before I go through is almost every single slide that I've got here has been used with a very specific prompt that I used in ChatGPT. And some of the images in here are fictional, and they're based off the data systems and knowledge bases that the ChatGPT model has picked up. So for some of you, the images may look like someone you know. That is not intentional. This is just the prompt. It does, however, remind us that it is really important that we acknowledge that AI reflects the data as such and systems and assumptions that we give it. So it's really, really important that we kind of consider what that looks like. So if you do see a AI-generated image that looks like someone you know and love, that is not intentional. It's the way that the prompt itself was done. So why am I kind of talking about today? As a young Samoan girl that grew up in Auckland, that is a passionate Auckland Blues fan. I know I'm in Wellington, so this is probably deadly that I'm in Wellington talking about how great my favourite rugby team is. One of the things that I've learned really early on in my life was that, and this is something that I've kind of carried into my adult life, is leadership in particular. There's two kind of frameworks I've grown up with. One is a Pasifika system and culture, which is that the loudest voice in the room is not the one that wins. It is the one that fosters collaboration, alignment and communication. Whereas in the Western framework, it is often, and we will acknowledge that in some of our meetings, the HiPPO, or the highest paid person in the room, is the person that gets to decide the outcome of what we are talking about. And so sometimes as a consequence, the decisions that we have are of subpar quality when we reflect further back. What I'm really trying to highlight with this particular slide is that I didn't have a traditional background. I did not study comp sci. I have run multiple transformation teams, and the actual difference in my upbringing really shapes the way that I think. And I put in there my school motto because it helps me focus, and that means through trials to triumph. And having worked in public, there are a lot of trials, and then you sometimes achieve. But most of it is remembering that when we think of AI and we think of technology and the roles that we work in, the hardest challenge that our organisations live with is not actually technical. They're very rarely technical. More times than not, it's actually about aligning different perspectives, and that's really what I'm going to be talking about today. And just as I press next. So, as I mentioned earlier, I have spent a lot of my life navigating two worlds. One in which the loudest voice wins every single time. The second one, which is a Samoan or Polynesian framework, which is leadership styles and communication is based on respect and listening, observing, and then creating space for voices or perspectives that may not have been heard because we kind of shut down the other options. So one of the key things that I've really kind of learned is, as growing up in a Samoan family, and you would have saw just before, I'm 7 of 9 children. I have 6 brothers, so I'm very comfortable in telling men what to do. So that's really, really shaped their upbringing. One of the real things that we want to think about is when the reason this has become, for myself, commercially advantageous is that upbringing and being in two worlds has actually meant that I understand a key lesson, which is how to read the room and understand it before you move it. So when you're thinking about moving teams, moving organisations, you need to know what that kind of looks like, how we're shaped, and at what point do we start moving towards something that is progressively better. And making spaces for different ways of thinking is actually the real challenge that we have for Aotearoa in tech. And it's also a really good way that we can kind of make a position as a point of difference. So, this is a really key critical message. Like, if we copy paste what happens in Silicon Valley, we are just Silicon Valley in New Zealand. But actually, we are very different. We're ambitious. One of the things we want to think about is if we do the same thing as Silicon Valley, we are merely scaling the same problems, which is things like you're going to use AI to scale bias, scale exclusion, scale groupthink. We are basically scaling the same blind spots that got us to where we are. So one of the key things we want to think about is we can build differently if we factor in things such as cultural intelligence, and I'll kind of go through and explain a couple of things around cultural intelligence, cognitive diversity, and something which is called a Talanoa framework. And as we go through, we'll get through that. And if you have questions, come see me after, because I've only got 40 minutes. And I started my career as a product manager, and if I don't get stopped, I'll just keep talking. So what is cultural intelligence? When we look up here, it's basically the ability to work across difference. I have been very privileged that in my career, I have led teams or been in teams where people have, a third of the team have not grown up in New Zealand. They've grown up in countries where English is not the dominant language, and therefore I've had to learn, growing up in that really big family, that I've had to understand that people communicate differently, we solve differently, and we contribute differently. So basically, cultural intelligence is about being effective across difference. And one of the key reminders why this is important is that we don't always feel safe speaking up in the same way. So you heard that I said that I'm number 7 out of 9. I have 6 brothers. I'm a twin that doesn't speak Samoan but is in a Samoan family. We have to learn how to build that kind of muscle of speaking up. Some people don't have that, and having leaders that help us kind of facilitate that conversation and give them that space to talk is critical. So, having cultural intelligence unlocks the potential that we have that is in our teams that we have already. New Zealand is very lucky that we have very diverse teams that make up our tech teams. Having worked in government, not-for-profit and private, it is a very diverse landscape, but we need to harness what that energy kind of looks like. So, what we want is to produce teams that out-innovate. We want them to think differently. This is not about tooling. It's not about, do you have, in my current job, I have access to 9 different language models because it's a private company. But tools only help you move fast. What's really important when we think about innovation and AI is that people still decide what matters, what problems are worth solving, and what trade-offs are acceptable. So the tool only aligns and gives you capacity, it makes things visible. This is also where the risk becomes real when we think about AI. So, as I mentioned earlier, AI accelerates whatever already exists. If the system has a bias, so too does the AI. So it does not fix broken systems. Again, it is a tool. Whatever bias you have and you put into it is the bias that it will scale. And it will scale without any guardrails. So really just a reminder that it does not fix broken systems, it magnifies what those broken systems are. So it could be cultural, it could be the data, it could be the way that you communicate, it's going to magnify that issue. When we think about Aotearoa in the context, we need to look honestly about who is shaping those systems and what effect does it have when we think of AI and how we can use this in a space to grow our use of AI in New Zealand. So the data that we're looking at is from the most recent Toi Mai Workforce Development Council, Barriers to Diversity in Aotearoa Tech. What's really important here is, one, this is actually increased, so yay. The last time I looked at it, I think Pasifika was sitting at about 2.9%, so the increase is huge. Māori was sitting at about 4%, so this is really good. What it's really telling us is who is shaping Aotearoa's tech in terms of the technology decisions that we make, whether it's government, private. And what it really highlights is who is still missing in these conversations when we're making these decisions. So this isn't me talking about being fair. Fairness is important. What this actually highlights is that we actually have challenges that are facing us, which are in relation to decision quality and what the product quality looks like, what innovation quality looks like, if all you've got is a bunch of people that went to the same university. So one example I will give is almost all of your policy writers in New Zealand government went to the Victoria School of Government. They're all taught by the same lecturer, and they wonder why the policy looks the same every single time and why the impact. So it's really important, doesn't matter whether you're in tech or in policy, that you really think about picking a team that's more reflective of the communities that they're serving or the communities that you're looking to build out services for. So why does this matter in the age of AI? A lot of organisations have diversity on paper. We have this gender of women, block here, men here. But what we don't have is diversity when we think of conversation. And when perspectives are missing, innovation will narrow, bias increases, and empathy decreases. So it's really important to highlight in this sense that diversity on paper is not the same as diversity in decision making. And at the end of the day, you could have 100 people in the room. If they all make the same decision or deflect to the same people lead, you are going to get the same outcome every single time. So what I'm going to go through quickly is what are we looking to build and define when we talk about innovative teams. I'm just going to go through a quick definition of cognitive diversity. In essence, we're looking to build teams that have different ways of thinking. So this could be age, gender, the profession that they have, the cultural background they have, the language that they have, their lived experience, the way that they perceive risk, the way that they perceive opportunity. Different ways of thinking really is the starting point when you're looking to build out teams that are going to out-innovate. Because if everyone is using the same tools, what they don't have is teams that are a really good mix of perspectives and upbringings. So if diversity creates potential, and I'm going to talk shortly about cultural intelligence. So you have the diversity, which is the makeup, so they're all from different ways of thinking. Then the cultural intelligence, which is to work across those differences and facilitate moving towards really good decisions. That's going to help us unlock the potential that AI gives us, which is the ability to do stuff at pace, but making sure that what we're doing at pace is the right thing. So one of the key challenges when we think about this is most teams do not design for cognitive diversity. We hire people that sound like us, that go, yeah, that's exactly how I would build that app. Why would you build it that? I love Apple. I'm not an Apple person, so I would pick Android every time. So yeah, picking that same much of the likeness of yourself just perpetuates the problem because your problem solving is the same. So when we think of here, we've all been in this meeting where you've got it's usually a white male, and we'll highlight that. Usually his name is Mark or John. And we're always in that meeting and they're like, yeah, we do this, we do that. And there's always someone that's quiet, that's kept their perspective. There's always a very introverted person that has a really solid point that they're going to highlight. One of the things that so like I mentioned earlier, we call these people HiPPOs. I do, that is, the highest paid person in the room. One of the things that is mistaken is that speed is alignment. It's not. It's I'm protecting my job because the CEO's in the room telling us to go build this app in 2 weeks, as opposed to, do we actually need it? No, there's no market for it. So, as I mentioned earlier, if your team, you've got a lack of perspective, so never mistake speed for alignment. It is 9 times out of 10 protection. Could be patch protection, could be you don't know who the hell this new guy is, you're just wondering how do I get my job. That is very real. So one of the key things that I do, which I've done in many a retro or a sprint planning session, or when I'm thinking and running teams that have UX designers, BAs, or just sometimes just pure engineers that don't understand what I'm talking about. This is a 60-second diversity check. It is only a minute, so it's not going to kill you in terms of your session. Key questions are, whose voice is missing? What assumptions are we making? Who is impacted and who disagrees but doesn't want to say anything till later? This really is about making sure the different perspectives are heard and factor into the quality of your decision making. So should we do this, or is this the 10th time we tried to fix this app and it's died every single time? So that kind of insight is really important. So again, innovation doesn't happen because you had 100 people invited to the meeting. It actually happens when different perspectives are intentionally brought in on the decision. And in Pasifika cultures, which I'll go through shortly, we already have a framework for this. And this is an academic framework, but I didn't realize it's an academic framework. This is just how I grew up. And it's called the Talanoa framework. So it's really just about building, and that's Star 1, in case you're wondering why that doesn't look Tongan or Cook Island. So that's respect, care, and integrity. And this is, again, if we think about this, the goal is not to win the argument. In Western frameworks where I've had to sit in meetings, I've literally had senior architects scream about who was right. And I've had to explain to them, this is not about who's right. We can both be right at the same time and still achieve the same outcome. It is not about winning. This is about alignment. And one of the key things is like, we've got to get better at not having loud conversations, and instead it's about having better conversations. What we want to also highlight is often we talk about things as like, this is a soft skill. People skills is not a soft skill. It is the hardest thing you will have to do as a job. One of the key things that we want to think about is the quality, and so I said that, which is what we need is a framework that helps us be more innovative. And the reason for this is that quality of decision making, which improves over time, fixes and improves what you build. This is not new. My Pasifika Polynesian ancestors understood this long before this was a term that was given in a university. So when we think about the things that are coming through here, Polynesians have traversed the world's largest oceans for hundreds of years. And one of the key things that we did was actually, we used our collective intelligence. We had shared direction, we had adaptation. Not one person knew all the answers. They understood the stars, the ocean, and the wind. And what it really highlighted was that this knowledge sharing was passed and shared continually all the way throughout. There was different roles that kind of fit in individually, worked together, moved, and started making sure that this is being built out. So why is this important? AI is designed to help us see patterns faster, ask better questions, make a better sense of complexity. What it doesn't remove is the human responsibility to decide what matters in Aotearoa, and, you know, how do we kind of decide those things? If we think about Aotearoa, you could probably use the notion that AI is a digital Kaiawhina, so it's a helper. It guides, it supports, it's a co-pilot, it's a capability enhancer. It is not a replacement. When we think about this, it is not wisdom. It is not going to have that collective wisdom. It is not culture, it's not leadership. At the end of the day, people are still accountable for the consequences that these AI tools make or promote or present as the way that we can do something and build it. When teams understand that AI is there to enable, it becomes a more powerful tool than less. So it's less about, am I getting replaced by this AI agent that can do this job 24 hours of the day? No, because it still needs the guardrails. It still needs high quality decisions, high quality rules, and the humans are the ones that decide that. So I'm just going to give an example here of like how we've used cognitive diversity in my current job. So in half a day, we built 3 apps, all built on AI applications. What's really important is that's the one engineer in the top right. Everyone else there was just giving him business context of here's the problem that we have, this is why it's really problematic, here's a couple of decisions. All I did, because I was away on day one, was write the entire framework that they needed to build. And then they attacked each other about, was it a real problem? How do we fix this? Does this work? And the team won. So it's really good for the team to see that solving a real business problem that had humans at the centre of what they were doing. Actually won the board chair's approval. He's like, this is great. How can you get this built? And I said, time, money and people. That always comes back to this. So I'll still chase him about how much money he owes me. Yeah, so you can kind of see here, cultural intelligence for me is the cat herding, finding out what my team needs to get it done, get it built better. And then their different perspectives really shape the way that the actual 3 apps were built in half a day. So one of the key things that we want to think about, that kind of example really highlights that when we think of innovation and how that happens, it actually is wholly reliant on trust. So trust determines whether the work that you're doing is worth accelerating. And the question then becomes, how do we build teams like that with intention? So one of the key things that I always remind people, as we said earlier, do not hire yourself. I have purposely hired a staff member who had very high EQ, very patient, very good at storytelling, because I have a limit to my EQ. And after a while, I just started getting really short and sharp. And I literally told her when I hired her, I hired you because you're not me. I don't want me. I want someone that's better and different in different ways. So leadership has to really pick what you're hiring, and you cannot leave hiring different perspectives to chance. It's an intentional piece of work. And that means there are key changes to leadership practices that need to occur. Some of them are just listed in here. So don't hire yourself. Make sure you know that disagreement will happen. Make sure the space is safe. Have diverse retros. Ask your team where they're from and how does the way that they come to work shape and the way that they're brought up shape the way that they problem solve the work that you are dealing with. Do they listen to a 1-hour Hindi religious song to get to work and then they listen to the same song on the way home so that they are focused on the job and they segment themselves between pre-work and work? When we look at this in particular, one of the key things that's really quite important is you need really good comms for non-technical people so that they can actively participate in the workshop that you are doing. Do not sit there and do a screen dump of the code that you've just built. The person from finance doesn't give a crap. They actually don't know what the hell it is. They just want to know how much money you're asking for and how will this solve their problem. One of the things that we need to really think about is how do we make cultural intelligence, which is like these types of behaviours and processes, and make it operational so that this is not just one team just happens to have a leader that does a thing a certain way. Making it operational means that it gives New Zealand, and in particular our tech sector, an opportunity to push this opportunity beyond individual teams and think of it as an approach to how we might grow as a country. So one of the key things here that we want to think about is we don't want to imitate the global tech culture. We want to build something distinctive. And the simplest way for this that I can explain is this particular image, which is cognitive diversity is who's in the waka, cultural intelligence is how we paddle together, and AI is the wind at our back that is enabling this pace that we can move. But without a shared direction, Like I said earlier, we just get there faster, it's the wrong thing, and we've paddled for no reason at all other than giving ourselves a pat on the back that we built something in 3 days, as opposed to building like the right thing. At the beginning, I was talking about how we can build it differently, but building differently isn't just a strategy, it's identity, it's voice and belonging. I had intended to play a very awesome song, but apparently copyright laws, so I won't do that. I would highlight that Addie Crummer released the song in 1992, and she's talking about culture, voice and humanity are not separate from innovation. They are what make innovation better. And in New Zealand's context, it actually becomes a marked point of difference as to how we will go and explore new markets and make Aotearoa, a signpost of what innovation looks like. So you have the makeup, you can get there. But it's really just important that you think of this as like, making sure those perspectives and decisions are kind of shaped as a group. At the start, and I'm going to do this last bit really quick because I don't know how much time I have left. Plenty. Okay. All right. I am a product manager, so I did warn him at the beginning, you need to cut me off. I'll just keep talking. At the start, I talked about how we have the opportunity to build differently. Everything you've seen today is what different looks like. You can do it. What I've described is not rocket science. Maybe it is for some people. To me, it's not. I'm open to chat to a bunch of you about how this has happened in the past and how you can feed in small incremental changes into your organisation or your team that's going to build differently. You do have to be curious about who your team is. Who are you? Where did you come from? So if you're in government, you would have known that you have to introduce yourself and give a pepeha. Who are you? Where are you from? Where are your people from? What makes you tick before work and after work? How does that shape the way that you problem solve challenges that you have? So for context, at work, I have a young Russian AI ops engineer that sits next to me. He's very, whatever the latest Gen X is, comes in on time, leaves on time. But he's also still very hierarchical because he's come from Russia. He has to find who the line of hierarchy looks like. And I said, who cares? Just go home on time. You did your job. And I am his workplace auntie. That is the culture that we're building at my new team. All right, your auntie said, go do this, go do it. And so these are the things that, they're small incremental changes. They're not huge. For a lot of Polynesians, the things that I've described are not new. What I would highlight, if you are Polynesian, Māori, Pasifika, please note that this is your commercial advantage in the market that you are currently in. Difference in perspectives and the ability to bring teams together is what makes a massive difference in whether or not you're going to produce things of value or things that your shareholders or the highest paid person in the room wants built fast. So I'm going to go through a couple of quick slides, which is just to explain some of the former teams that I've had. I think some of my team are in here, because I've been in Wellington for a while. So what you're going to see, and I'll go through quickly what they look like, what the kind of ideas were that we were talking about at the time. But what I'm talking about are not abstract ideas. These are real people, real teams. I did kind of fudge the imaging, so they do kind of look a bit special on the image. That is, that's the Dali-E ugly AI version of the people. So if they're here, I apologise now, Rosie. This team is a team that I was at in DIA. This is actually a mixture of solution architecture, UX, privacy, BAs, and a couple of randos like me. And what was really important here is that we were building a community that involved leaders and had conversations that really shaped how things were going to be built and why they were going to be built. And what's really important here is that this team here and the co-workers that I've met since then, these are the people that are building the New Zealand Digital Citizenship app, which is only one of 5 in the world that are truly digital. Everyone else has a PDF which is not digital. And one of the key things I want to highlight is innovation is always shaped by people first before it becomes a platform. Last night, if you were at the kickoff event, you would have heard things like people process engineering is really critical in the next 5 years. I would probably say it's critical right now. All the tooling in the world doesn't help you define what the experience looks like end to end. It doesn't tell you where the human will decide or where the logic will kind of go through and get to that point of here's a outpouring of information that your brain can consume, decide yes or no. So that's really important. We hear things like people, process and tech. That's really, really critical. In this slide here, you can see it somehow made me look really weird, but that's okay. This is a different sector, it's still part of government. And what's really important, which I'll just kind of highlight here, is perspectives change outcomes. So this team here is the first product team I was in 2015. The entire product team was from the Pacific Islands. That is rare. So me as a number and a stat in New Zealand, I am less than 1% in New Zealand. Worldwide, 0.00001. So to get the first gig to have a bunch of islanders cracking jokes, teaching Wellingtonians the importance of the Auckland Blues, that was really brilliant. And up there is one of the key things that we do is when you're in a role, and particularly if you're a Pacific Islander, it's really important to give back. Since 2015, I constantly give back in ways that I can, which is public speaking or going to events, running events that will help Pasifika and Māori get into tech or even consider technology as a role. This is really important if we want our wider communities to get involved. If you can, there's lots of non-profits that know nothing about tech. They think it's Skynet when they think of AI. So there are opportunities to really uplift New Zealand from the ground up. And these don't take a lot of time. If you can, you can. So this one is we're mentioning Rosie. When we think about this, which is in this team in particular, you'll see here that the CTO is crouched, he's really good. And this was the entire leadership team for tech, which is quite rare at that time. It's still quite rare that it's mostly female. Because of that, we made different decisions as to how and what we built. And it often meant we did have to train our young Filipino CISO that, no, you will do it in this order because the women have decided. He got really good at that, probably because his mum is an awesome woman too. But yeah, so you can see here, this team. Oldest was late 50s, youngest was 22. Some people we just pulled from the upstairs contact centre. No tech experience, but helping us shape, design and build. One was training to be a lawyer and figured out that tech was easier than, I was like, oh, great. So when we think about transformation, delivery and tech, the strongest teams are never the teams that think alike. They're actually the ones who learn to think together. So we talked earlier about cultural intelligence, we talked earlier about cognitive diversity and Talanoa as a framework. This is really critical because, again, this type of stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum. You have to decide you're going to hire people that are different. And the lady up there that's standing with the blue blazer, that is the person that I said, I hired you because you are so different from me. And she said, wow. I said, yeah, because I don't want to hire myself. This business cannot survive multiples of Norie in the organisation. And really, you're picking different. You hire different, you're going to pick different solutions each and every single time, and it's going to be better. It's not going to be 100% bulletproof, but it'll be better. So I like this picture because I created a hot sauce club at this company. And this was a really good way for me to get my business on board as to what were we building and why were we building it. At this time, I had to manage 9 platforms. It was crazy. But the business was on board. We made our techies attend this consistently to connect, bond, and share ideas. It meant that we were in rooms when the problem was first being identified from the business, rather than, hey Norie, I went and bought this widget, I bought it on my work credit card, can you just plug it in and make it work? So the push here in the team was to be, we are your trusted technology advisor. To do that, you need to know who's in your team. What do they like doing? Eating. When do they like doing it? As soon as possible. 3, half of that team was not born in New Zealand. So connection over food, people, that helped us to form the connection as to what was the right thing to do, when was the right thing to do it. It meant that if I had a P1, I could go into a chat and say, good morning, we are currently experiencing a P1. Please advise your team to get off. We are fixing. Don't raise any tickets. We are managing this. And half of the leadership team were like, yep, great, what can we do? So you're less, the tech shop that's doing stuff, and you're more, this is my mate that happens to work in tech, and we're going to figure out how can we fix the problems that we have. So I highlight this one. This is the youngest team I've ever managed. I felt so old, but that's okay. 19, videographer. 20, doing a marketing degree. I said, we're going to refresh the website, you got 2 weeks. I said, you ever heard of a design sprint? We're going to do an aggressive one. And every morning, 9 a.m., 4 in the afternoon, 2 updates. What have you done? Where is it? And these 2 refreshed an entire company's website in 2 weeks. I said, don't worry, it's only Squarespace, so you can just update the content. There's no risk. You're fine. And this also included them doing user experience testing, research, deploying, demoing to their colleagues, all within a 2-week window of time, because I did not have the patience to wait any longer. What I learned from them is, damn, they've got big brains. And I really appreciate it. At 19 and 20, they had the courage and the ambition to just do it. Now that I'm old, I can't limit myself, and I think, damn, that's why I need to hang out with young people. So the marketing genius also happened to come up with an entire new branding strategy, which helped them enter the Australian market in health science and case management. So I thought it was really cool. And as you can see, this is the rest of them, the non-marketing product team. They're all very serious. And this is just a couple of slides we'll go through. This is like the actual version of the team. You can see here that we won $2,000. I'm chasing when I'm getting my $2,000 because that means I can go out to dinner and charge a lot of money. One of the key things I just highlight here is the guy on the top left. It's actually an IT ops. He hates public speaking. I said, if you can edit the video that we have to submit for our presentation, you're fine. This poor guy, for 3.5 hours one night, we were like, no, move this, Brent, move this, no, cut this here, cut this here. He had to learn in half a day to find the best video editing tool and pull in a whole bunch of video to collapse it into a 2-minute video that had to go to a Lion's Den presentation. And that really highlighted earlier, different people. That team is really critical into having innovation with different perspectives. This is some of my new team. You can see we take ourselves seriously. That's why we pose with tomato sauce. My team is very different, and I love hearing what they've done. I also give them the opportunity to tell me that I've broken reporting yet again. And I like Jira for the pretty pictures. I don't like it for everything else I have to do. And they make sure that it works. But likewise, they have the opportunity to challenge me. I do say to them, as your leader, I will not tell you how to suck an egg. You know how to do your job. You are really good at it. What I don't know is if things are happening that I can't help you with. So often ask my teams, what is the leadership style you want? And we're going to go with that. What you need is what I need to do. And the same token, you need to respect your peers, that they'll be challenging, but we will get there sometime soon. Sometimes our stakeholders struggle with decision making, and that's why we're working on what is the way that we can improve our decision making at the current shop. So, as mentioned earlier, the future of tech will not be built by tech alone. It will be built by teams and the cultures and the values that those teams hold. Your team could be your organisation, it could be your individual team that you work in. And this is important for Aotearoa as we kind of position ourselves forward, and what that means for us to get ahead, become innovative leaders, and really think about how we can stretch ourselves. So we'll just wrap up. We're going to achieve what we need to do by not copying louder systems. We're going to do it by building wiser ones that foster collaboration, communication, and celebrating where we've come, so that the things that we build, the things that we push out, and the things that we leave behind for the communities that we work in are better, because we started by thinking, how do we decide better? How do we hire better? And how do we evaluate that the decisions we've made in the past and the things that we're making coming forward will work for not just our own teams, but also for Aotearoa. That's it.